I've been spending a lot of time thinking about how we consume our content. Being a filmmaker, the rise of on-demand entertainment is at the forefront of our industry. For the same price of a single movie theater ticket, one could stream countless hours of film and TV on a monthly subscription. We have so much content at our fingertips. But maybe that abundance of choice is demotivating. And it makes me wonder, will we one day find value in relinquishing that responsibility and go back to the days where broadcasting was revered? Radio has always been the gatekeeper for music discovery. But with the rise of on-demand suppliers such as Spotify, those lines are disappearing. The best person one could talk to about the future of audio entertainment is Tom Bola, former music programmer at MTV Sweden and current music director and host at Power Hit Radio. Tom has seen these changes happen in real time, and he has the insight to anticipate what lies ahead. So how long have you been at Power Hit Radio?
Now it's my second year, I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the conversation like in the workspace about kind of like rising independent, either podcasts or talk shows? Is that like an active conversation or?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you can see, for instance, Spotify is focusing on audio.
Yeah.
And I think that is the biggest thing now, is that radio has always been about the cars.
Okay.
Obviously, in the beginning, many people were listening at home, but the biggest audience has always been when you're in the car.
Like on the way to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming back home.
Especially if you're in the United States, for instance.
Yeah.
You're sitting a lot in your car, going somewhere.
Yeah.
And Spotify before was so focused on just the streaming side where you listen in an app. And what's so different about those two categories is that when you listen to Spotify, then you maybe are alone and you're going on a bus or you're going somewhere or you're doing something at home, something like that. Radio always been focused on that you can be in the car sitting with more people in the car or alone, and it's more like a companion. From a radio perspective, it haven't changed so much, because what you should know is that how you kind of measure how many people are listening to radio, it's based on this people meter. They have it for TV in the States or in other countries as well. So you do kind of, what can you say? You ask the whole population how many people are listening to radio, and then you know that it's around 60% maybe in Sweden. And based on that, you have a panel with 1,550 people that represents the whole population in Sweden.
Okay.
And then they actually kind of, what did you call it? I think it's around 4 times per year they change this panel.
Okay.
And it's based obviously where in Stockholm, for instance, there are more people living than, for instance, in Malmö. So it's
like
more
population density.
Exactly.
Copy.
So depending on where you are, 1 meter represents more or less people. So you get those numbers every day.
What's the trend now with radio? Going up, going down?
During the Corona, it probably went down, but not that much.
I thought it would be the other way around. Like being at home, you want that companion.
But so much, and that's why we come back to habits. Because if you're a regular person, for instance, if you have a family, maybe you listen to radio in kitchen in the morning if you're a little bit older because you're used to doing that. Then you jump into the car, you drive your kids to school or something, and probably the radio is on there with this type of morning show.
Yeah.
And maybe you get around 10 minutes or 10 to 20 minutes by yourself listening to something, and then you go to work, and maybe the radio is on work, depending on where you work, obviously. And when you go home, the radio is in the car and so on.
Yeah.
So what's actually changed is the idea how habits is going to change. And as we mentioned, Corona here, if people are home, they probably use the TV as a companion more than something else.
Okay.
Like it's so easy to have something on just while you're working or something. So that changed a little bit. But if you look at the ratings, it's maybe not more than 2 to 3%.
Okay, so not a stark difference. It's just,
exactly. So that changed a little bit. But when you're talking about streaming and so on, you could see that Spotify want to go into the car because it's so much people listening in the car.
Yeah.
And radio needs always to focus on being that companion, and they need to serve either a music mix that people like, or they need to be personalities that people like.
Yeah.
And there are rumors that Spotify is going to try to do that as well.
I mean, the implementation of music in their talk shows, I think that's a big foreshadowing.
Yeah. But we're still going to come down to also the habits, because everything changed so much when it comes to young people.
Okay.
Actually, the whole music industry have changed based on Spotify.
Tell me more about that, please.
Yeah, because before when you bought CDs, they cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the people who could buy CDs were actually album, because there was not so many people buying the singles. It was more like the albums. You need to have your own salary. You're probably older than 25.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There was a barrier of entry.
Exactly. And that, I mean, everyone was looking like, okay, which are the biggest hits? And it was based on sales charts.
Okay.
And also you got your information from radio, obviously, but radio was more like you maybe not buy all the albums that were playing on radio, but it was nice to have a playlist that was just
absolutely
with the music you liked, kind of. And now with Spotify and also YouTube, it's actually the guys who have the most time in their life to listen to music or watch videos. And those are around 16.
Wait, 16 or 60?
16.
16. They have the most time.
Yeah, because they also listen to tracks on repeat.
Is that a new phenomenon to today, or?
No, because when you, I mean, earlier when you had, I mean, if you go really way back, people recorded radio on cassettes.
Okay, yeah, I think I did that as a kid.
Yeah, exactly. And then you rewinded, listened to the track again and so on, or you put in the tracks many times on the same cassette. So that's probably the same as doing a playlist with the same tracks or repeat it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even when I was a kid, you'd like make CDs for your friends, like the playlist that you'd burn into a CD.
Yeah. And the thing was then you're an early adopter in that age because you try to find new music all the time.
Right, okay.
And streaming is based on when you listen to a track for 30 seconds, it's the artist or record company or someone gets the money.
They get a cut.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the total opposite from when people bought albums, because then it was an older audience who paid a lot of money for an album. Here's just a stream where you listen a lot on.
Yeah.
And those guys are 16 who actually makes the most streams.
So does that kind of change the incentive for an artist to kind of worry more about singles, like hit singles versus curating an album?
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah. What are other goals that have changed? I mean, I know now some artists are just trying so hard to get something go viral on TikTok.
Yeah.
Or something that would not have been a goal for a label a year ago or 2 years ago.
No, because the thing is, if you're also already famous as an artist, then you can get your back catalog to stream a lot now.
What's a back? Oh, like all the stuff you've already done. Okay.
And that's what you're seeing a lot now when it comes to the rights of the tracks. For instance, Taylor Swift is recording her tracks again.
You're right, yeah.
Because she want to have the rights for those recordings. And if she release a brand new album, the old ones are still going to stream a lot as well. And TikTok is one of those things that's going to turn them probably into rockets. If people start dancing to a new track from Taylor Swift, for instance, then it's going to become huge on streaming as well.
Well, I don't think there's any other app that makes music so shareable.
No.
You know, the fact that you can have an audio and anyone can make a video to it.
Yeah.
Spotify can't do that. Instagram before couldn't do that.
No.
It's really like such a blessing for musicians.
Well, then we come back actually to my work with radio, because now TikTok is influencing what we pick for track for playing.
Okay.
Because radio needs to be even more clear what the brand stands for. So for instance, with Power, we are like more or less hit music nonstop. And it's more curated at something that's called CHR, contemporary hit radio. And it's a little bit younger as a target audience. Where we lose is where, because we need to play tracks that everyone loves.
4-quadrant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there are artists like, for instance, Cardi B. Every time she releases a track, and we do the test, because we test the songs based on panels and what they think about them.
Interesting. Whoa.
Yeah.
I didn't know there's so much research.
Yeah, I come back to that.
Yeah.
The funny part is that if you check a Cardi B track, it's always like 50% of the girls love it, 50% hates it. But it probably looks on Spotify or YouTube that it's one of the biggest hits.
Yeah.
But if you're in a room with 10 people and 5 of the guys listen to the tracks 100 times, it's going to look like the whole room actually think this is a hit.
Okay.
But the 50%, the other 5 guys
hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a radio station, the problem is if you play tracks that 50% is going to turn away from. And you end up also in understanding like, yeah, but we maybe not play the tracks that people really love then as well. And that's a different thing between streaming and
That's
radio.
so fascinating.
Yeah.
What about, because I mean, with my industry as well, the whole rise of on demand.
Yeah.
I find it so fascinating. You know, people are willing to pay a certain amount a month to get the content that they want. What does that mean for advertisers? You know, people who are dependent on the people listening to your radio.
Yeah.
If less people are willing to listen to radio, what does that mean?
Yeah. And I think as long as it's so easy to listen to radio in the cars, it's still going to go on for a long time. But as you're mentioning, if people want to pay, but then you have to think about, okay, how much they want to pay and for what? I mean, if you look at Spotify, you pay 100 kronor in Sweden for getting all the music in the whole world.
Yeah.
If you look at what's coming up now, you're going to pay Patreon or their own business model at Spotify or Apple, for instance. And then you're going to pay maybe 30 kronor per month.
Yeah.
And you only get one podcast.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. My bad.
Yeah. So I think we're going to see something going to happen there. And when it comes to the advertisers then, I think those podcasts that are so wide when it comes to audience, they're probably going to need those sponsors, advertisers for the show, because I don't think there are people who want to pay for really specific podcasts that they really like, but if you like those more mainstream, then maybe you don't want to pay for it, and then the advertisers can be coming from that part.
What about like brands making their own content? Because with like Ingen Reklam Tack, what if brands made the content that people actually seek out to see versus reject advertising from a brand?
It could work maybe. Some kind of product placement then actually from their side, or just...
I'm thinking even bigger. Like not only just product placement, but let's say think of a jewelry brand. If the target market are ladies over 40, if that brand made a podcast about things that target audience deals with, but it just so happens to be done by the brand, but you don't really have to talk about the brand.
It's more getting the perception then that you connect.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah,
I think it could be quite advantageous for a brand because they know their target audience perfectly. They can really make a niche podcast, which I feel like now is the trend. Like the more niche you are, the better. Like there's a podcast that reviews only baseball movies. Like, it's so specific.
But it probably works really well, and especially if you think long term. To connect with the audience. But you probably now, because that is also kind of the new thing, you need probably a person that actually are right for the audience who actually say those things.
A personality.
Personality. Because, I mean, if you look back 30 years or 40 years, every brand were like, we're the cool brand. Michael Jordan is promoting his shoes and stuff like that, and the brand is really cool. But today I think it's really hard to not have a personality in just the brand. You need to kind of build a brand through the personalities.
I can agree. What about the democratization of audio content. I mean, with podcasts and talk shows, I remember that used to be purely radio.
Yeah.
Like you need a full team, you need full equipment, but now anyone can start a podcast.
Yeah.
What's that conversation like at work? Is that kind of a threat to you, or is it a celebration of the craft? What's it like?
It's kind of a celebration, actually, in one way. Because when people start their podcast, they maybe do it in the kitchen and so on.
Yeah.
And then maybe we, as a brand, or as a company, the company that owns all the radio stations, maybe benefit actually from connecting with those podcasts, because we probably can sell those sponsorships.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
And then the podcasters can use our studios in that deal. And
Brilliant.
they like it because they get even better sound.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things. So what's great about it is that you can actually find talents that you didn't know about before, but now it's much faster to pick them up, kind of.
Okay. I love seeing the positive side of it. That's awesome. I love that.
And that's the thing with, since I work with Power, it's a lot of music. It's more comparing to a playlist maybe in Spotify and streaming. We try to make the playlist in the radio more seamless and more appealing, that someone who's not that interested in music, because that is probably the biggest audience, they just turn something on and they like it when they step into the car, or maybe try to stream it or stuff like that. When it comes to podcasts, people seem to like that it's just pure talking when they actually turn this podcast on.
It's company.
Yeah, because they probably do something else while they're listening, and they're probably lonely while they're listening, because you don't listen to a podcasting group most of the time.
No.
So that's a big difference also.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And that makes it also interesting from a Spotify perspective, which they don't tell. And that is that the music is probably competing against podcast when it comes to listening, because their biggest listening is when people are lonely and put something on. And
interesting.
Yeah, so that's what I'm seeing from my own habit, is that I'm listening more to podcasts now, but that means that I'm listening less to regular music in the same app.
Whoa, I never even thought about that. What about other competitors for Spotify? Is it other music platforms, or is it other entertainment media like TV or movies?
Interesting question. Probably, I would say TV maybe, and streaming services like that.
Is it a competition for attention?
Yeah,
Got it.
time spent.
Time spent.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, of course, Apple is going to try to do their style with podcasts now, and you're probably going to see YouTube doing it as well.
You think YouTube is going to do podcasts? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. They started in one way. I mean, obviously, we're recording this on screen.
Yeah.
So it's more like being on every platform. Then you have to come up with what's the best way of being on every platform. Is it the same material that should be on the all the platforms, or should it be in another way, depending on how people consume it?
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, what we learned is like one size doesn't fit all.
No.
But there is some middle ground.
Yeah.
You could do a lot. I mean, the reason I do video, I think about my habits. And with the podcast, I put it on while I'm cooking.
Yeah.
And I like having that video on because I can glance over at it, especially if they're talking about something that shows up on screen. Yeah, I think the ways people are consuming this content is different. But with this rise of on-demand everything, Netflix down to music, what do you think comes after? Is there going to be a pendulum shift where people are going to appreciate relinquishing this responsibility and they'd like that radio approach of music discovery? Or do you feel like the line is going to keep going in the direction of on-demand, be even more specific?
That's a good question. Because one of the points that makes actually radio be really strong is discovery.
Okay.
Funny enough, but it means that we add maybe 3 to 6 songs per week to our playlist, and
wow, is that a lot or little? It sounds little.
That's pretty for radio. That's pretty much actually.
Really?
Yeah, and it's based on familiarity. So we put the new songs between the regular one people knows about.
Yeah.
And people don't switch channels if they're familiar with something. And then you have a presenter who actually talks about the new track, so people understand why we play the new track.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit different than the approach from Spotify when it comes to playlist, and you're only going to find your new tracks, but it's a younger audience there as well.
Yeah.
When you have a regular life, you're not so maybe interested in new stuff, especially if you're turning 30 and up.
Yeah.
Then you are pretty used to what you like and
yeah, isn't that like an actual saying that after 30, your music taste doesn't change?
Exactly.
Is that true? Is that fact?
Yeah, it's between 15 until 24, I think. That's the...
Really?
Because first, everything changed between 15 to 20. And then you find your own niche between 20 and 24. And then after that, if you start maybe a family or something like that, you become more mainstream. You don't think so much about the new stuff, but you still like the tracks you have from the earlier days.
So I'm 24 now.
Yeah.
Does that mean that when I'm 80, I'm going to be listening to like hard rap?
It could be.
That okay.
Could be.
I like that image.
It depends. Because if you're getting children, then you're going to hear a lot of children tracks.
Okay.
And that's probably going to change you a little bit and so on. It's always funny to see parents' Spotify playlists when they have the children playing all the tracks, because it's going to be so weird compared to earlier.
But I'd love to answer this question about like what's coming next.
Sorry. I don't know. The discovery thing is probably because, I mean, we're trying with radio, we're probably going into and doing more like, I've heard from all the stations all over the world, trying to do premium services and stuff without commercials, because commercials is probably something that it's people hate in the end.
Ingen Reklam Tack.
Exactly. But we need to finance what we do in some way.
Yeah.
And people like on demand. What's gonna probably be more, it's more maybe those FOMO things.
Okay.
Like football games, for instance. You don't want to see a football game a day after it's been played.
Okay, yeah.
And maybe some live concerts, stuff like that. But I think the on-demand thing will continue. Because that is so easy, especially for a family, to watch something when they have the time.
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't have to be one way or the other.
No. And I think radio is more like, not FOMO, but when you're there at the time, you listen to it. You don't listen to music radio. But podcast, for instance, it's much easier if you subscribe to something to listen when you have the time.
I mean, what I do, I'll start a podcast on Monday morning.
Yeah.
And usually the podcasts I listen to are like an hour, maybe 2 hours.
Yeah.
I can hit pause and I can keep listening to it when I come back home or whenever I have time.
And if you think about it, you listen, maybe you said 2 hours per day. It's 2 hours you don't listen to music.
Yeah.
That you did before, maybe. No,
that's so true.
Yeah.
Do you think podcasting is just going to be like a fad, or is it here to stay? Because it came by so fast. I'm afraid that like coming by so fast, it's going to burn out so fast too.
I think it stays. Definitely. But it's going to be less. I mean, everyone's doing a podcast now, you could say.
Yeah. Everyone has a podcast idea too.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's going to come down to that there are famous podcasters. And they're probably going to have one podcast now, and then they start something new, and people, you get fan of all the different personalities.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to continue. And I think what you can see in the States now when it comes to radio is that they pick up big podcasters and put them in the morning show together with the regular hosts.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because then you get all the fans who wants to listen to their personality also in the morning show. But they do it in another way when it comes to the morning show, obviously. You don't talk for an hour without break. So I think that's going to be different.
And now with Spotify allowing music on music talk shows, is that troublesome for you? Is that scary or?
Not at the time, I think.
Okay.
Maybe there's a really famous show in Sweden for national radio, P1, that's called Sommarprat. And that's when they take a famous person and they let them decide the music, and then they talk between the songs. Okay. And that's more or less exactly that function in Spotify.
Because, I mean, from what Spotify says, it's an interactive tool for music discovery. That's kind of the argument for radio, right?
Yeah.
I'm seeing conflict here. It's interesting, but it really makes me question if radio will become known as like an old school media format.
Yeah.
Is there anything that has to happen drastically to radio to make it kind of...
Yeah, I think a lot of people who worked in radio for a long time think of radio as some tech thing.
Okay.
That it's connected, because radio, FM radio, is actually the technical part, where frequency modulation radio
versus amplitude modulation.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And everyone needs to come down to the thought that we're doing audio productions.
Say that again. Everyone has to come down to the thought
that we actually are doing audio productions. We're doing audio, kind of.
Yeah.
This part. And the technical side is not that interesting where you listen and how. I have a great example of that. And it's my friend who has 3 kids. And his wife is always like, because he also works in the radio, one of the DJ, and she's so proud that you're in radio, because for us who grew up with radio and also TV and stuff like that, for us it's like when you're on radio or TV, you're actually picked up because you're doing something great.
Absolutely. You're validated by others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for his kids, it's like they're watching their iPad, they're watching YouTube, and they're like, for them, YouTube is the same thing as watching something on the TV. They don't understand why it's different watching something on the TV compared to the iPad and stuff like that. And that's is the point, that it doesn't matter in the future where it's aired. I mean, now it's an FM radio in the car, but for people who grew up with it, it was something special. It was radio. It was like, and a friend of mine who's actually working with a production company for podcasts, he said to me, ironically, he's like, you know what the new thing is? He's like, it's live podcasting.
That's radio.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the point. So
what old is new, what new is old.
Yeah, so you probably need to be on every platform, not focus on like the technical side, because now it's Spotify who is like taking the lead kind of, and they want to focus on that. And we're probably turning more into a production company when it comes to audio. And also, since we're a commercial radio, we probably can sell the sponsorship and stuff like that for those productions. And we're still going to continue having the FM radio, because it's going to take many years for that to change to something other in the car. I mean, probably you will have smart apps in the cars as well, but it's going to be even radio apps in that car as well, because that is the next step. All the companies, all the car companies actually, they want to build their own infotainment system now.
Really?
Yeah, because they've seen what actually Apple and Google are doing with their CarPlay and Android Auto, because they realize in the future that is going to be some income for them as well, the car company, because they can then decide who's going to be in their system, and it's going to be probably a 5G connection, and they're going to sell the car with the 5G connection already paid. It's packed into the price and stuff like that. And also, I mean, if you're outside the big cities, I mean, you will need to have cellular networks all over to actually be able to listen to all this streaming. And that's a good part about FM radio. You don't need that because it's so cheap compared to, you don't need all this cell antennas all over the places.
Yeah, Spotify has been adding so many new features with the addition of music into talk shows, but it's also been diving into video. I think with the acquisition of the Joe Rogan podcast, they introduced video. And now they introduce Canvas, which allows artists to add a 3 to 8 second loop to their now playing. Do you think that's some foreshadowing of Spotify wanting to kind of conquer a little bit more of media entertainment, diving into video?
They've been actually there before. They actually started putting in music videos as well for a short time. What they're doing now is, I think they're trying to not be too much video content, but still a little bit, just for like artists and stuff like that, to put something extra into it.
Yeah.
I think they want to focus on audio as their main focus, not to be too splitted. I think YouTube is interesting in that way, because they didn't really decide what they are. And there's so much viewing going on YouTube. And everyone can upload stuff there in another way.
Yeah.
So I think it will be interesting. I don't think Spotify is moving into video in that direction. It's more like what YouTube is going to do, if they're going to be more audio as well.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you anticipate that they will with podcasting?
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
That's a great insight.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can, for instance, there's a music genre that's really big on YouTube because they have live radios on YouTube with lo-fi hip-hop.
Yeah, you're so right.
Yeah.
That's so true.
And I was watching it the other day, and when I was watching, it was probably in the middle of the day here in Sweden, and it was like 50,000, I think it was 50,000 listeners at the same time.
The whole world can tune in.
Yeah, and it's so niche, but it's like music that don't have lyrics.
Yeah.
It's just something you have in
background noise, yeah.
When you're studying or something, if you're young or if you work.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that they allow that type of content as a radio station.
So do you see radio kind of adopting traditional like YouTube tendencies?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. I mean, I can tell you so much, but I mean, we're looking into what are other distribution platforms that could work for the type of content we do, and how do we promote that, and so on. I mean, you can see that, for instance, the morning show now, I think it's the radio station called Rix FM. Their morning show, they actually cut down the whole show. So it's only the talking.
Oh,
and they
for
do a
YouTube.
podcast of that actually. And they put it on every platform.
Okay.
And it's another way of listening to something, because some of the people wants the music and that something's going on, and some of them just want to listen to the whole thing with just
That's
people
brilliant.
talking.
I love that idea.
And that's something I think's gonna develop into something new.
Yeah, because I see Power Hit Radio, they have their YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed watching some of the videos.
I can actually explain the idea with that. And it was like 2 years ago, and we had this meeting with all the consultants and so on, and they always tell us what music to play and so on, and you focus on doing the research of what people like at the moment.
That's so
and
cool.
Yeah, so
I love that.
But we were like, but we need also to be in social media and video platforms and so on. And we had this camera system in the studio that's were cutting automatically between the cameras based on who's talking.
Oh.
And then we have...
Is it through like the mic signal volume?
Exactly. And we have a system that always record all the cameras going on and the cutting. So after you did an interview or something, you just can go into the system and cut out that piece and then put it on social media. And we realized that if we're only going to do content that is based on music, then it's going to get pretty boring. So we started developing, what type of content could we do on the same type of brand that has the same feeling as we have in radio, but it could be something else, like interviews an artist, or it could be some comedy stuff, but like it needs to be around youth, and it needs to be kind of mainstream and hit-oriented. So that's why we started that thing.
That's so brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, because then you get the brand out in the public. And it's funny because I was meeting up with some other radio guys who worked with National Radio on, I think it was before a concert. And he told me like, I'm watching this Powers Röda Rosor. That is like when they fake that they're a company that calls up a guy and say, hey, we're a new company that sells roses. Who do you want to send roses to? And then they have the girlfriend on the other line waiting and see if they're going to say that.
That's funny. Yeah.
So that's the main idea. But the funny part, he explained to me like, I like this part, I like this. And then in the end, because he said in the beginning, I'm listening to this on radio. But in the end, he said, I watched that on YouTube. And then you get the perception of you actually listening to radio. But it's based on that you see a person in a radio studio.
Yeah.
So that's good. That's also something for radio. As you mentioning Joe Rogan, it looks like they're sitting in a radio studio more or less.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they're probably just recording it for video.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
It seems like the boundaries are kind of disappearing. Everything's merging together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Definitely.
Well, I don't want to take too much of your time.
That's the worst.
Is there anyone here in the industry, or maybe out of the industry, that you think deserves some positive attention, that's really like killing the game, rising up?
Not a specific person, I think, but definitely the guys who tries new stuff now and realizes that it's about them as a person that is the brand.
Okay.
For instance, I can mention one, and that's Anis Don Demina in Sweden. He started as a DJ, actually. We're running around the place where I actually had my DJ gigs and so on. And then he started his own YouTube channel. And he got really big by doing interviews and different stuff. And he's now turning into getting invited to Let's Dance, for instance. He was in the finals now.
Hey, okay.
And other different TV shows going to the old media, kind of. And he has built his brand so strong based on that he built himself through Instagram or YouTube and socials. And I think people who realize that they can build themselves that way through TikTok or something and take it further.
Yeah,
those are the future persons that also radio stations are interested in, because it's all about getting that fan base. It's not about those fake accounts or the fake numbers of followers. It's like for an artist, it's when you actually put up your name for a concert, how many tickets you sell is the only thing. That's the same with the new personalities. And that's the different story before, because people could be famous as presenters, but they wouldn't have fans maybe. So the new thing is that you should have fans that like you, because those are the ones who's gonna be the ones who make your business go around.
Guaranteed butts in the seat.
Yeah.
Copy. So where can people find you? What are your socials?
Instagram, DJ Tom Bola as a word. That's the easiest part. Yeah.
And one more time, Power Hit Radio. What times can they hear your work?
Fridays and Saturday between 22 until 5 in the morning.
All right. Cool, dude. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, dude.
Cool.